Understanding narcissism from the point of view of a survivor, it's as heart-wrenching as it is mind-bending. You try to understand narcissism, it's a lot like, trying to solve a puzzle or trying to make sense of a puzzle where the pieces of the puzzle just keep changing and keep shifting. And to a survivor, there's a fragility that's there. It's almost like, we're like a vase, and inside the vase we hold all our cherished memories, our identity, our sense of purpose, our dreams, all go into this vase. And through narcissistic abuse, there's just such an immense, relentless emotional storm that it just smashes this vase to smithereens, and what we're left with are just pieces of what was once us. Because all the pieces are there. We are whole. It's just we're scattered in different places, and we can put ourselves back together again. We can. The whole thing to understand with narcissism, and just for abuse survivors and their recovery process, is that it isn't just any kind of trauma. It's a narcissistic traumatic injury, and what it is made up of just countless traumatic jabs that are just kind of pushed into you over time. And it can feel like that it's slowly etching away at our own identity. And it comes at us slow. There's nothing fun about it, because it's all just one tiny tear after another that escalates slowly over time. And we can't even tell when we're in the middle of it how this was acceptable. And it started by making this acceptable, and then that was acceptable, and that acceptable, and that acceptable. If we actually look at the narcissistic relationship at its fundamental core, if we look at like the worst thing that a narcissist has ever done to us, the worst thing, and we didn't leave the relationship or end it there, it's like that kind of gives us a hint to how much these little toxic little terror attacks have affected our ego, have affected our subconscious. Because there's a grooming process in narcissistic abuse. And the grooming is just done over time, slowly. Though we can look back and say, yeah, it was several little points that I didn't see, that I didn't catch, that this toxic narrative that got so bad towards the end could have been stopped much earlier. But the reality is we just didn't see it at the time. It just wasn't on our radar until things got that bad. And when they get that bad, that's when changes happen. So this process that you're going through is a normal process, because it's happening to you, and it's also happening to thousands of other people. And it's only now that we're starting to get the language to understand it better and identify it. And it's really hard to understand sometimes, this emotional turmoil that the narcissistic abuse just kind of thrusts upon us. Our brains just kind of get scrambled like an egg and just beat up and then mixed in with all these other ingredients, all these toxic tactics that just kind of get mixed up and then fried up. And we remember what we were, and then we look back at what's become of us. It's like, it's no wonder that we're left just feeling bewildered and disoriented and just constantly questioning what's real. And the big problem is that all this confusion is generated in order to just make our lives more complicated and keep us trapped in these manipulative games. It is this narcissistic maze of manipulation and mind games and enormous amounts of deceit. And to a survivor, what's happening is desperately just trying to hang on to anything that feels that it isn't, that is truth, that is real. Just grasping onto truth in this delusional world of narcissism where everything feels like it's an illusion. And what's it like, this emotional terrorism that narcissists just continually put their victims through? And when you're in it, trying to make sense of it, it's a mind bender. It's like trying to decipher David Lynch's Twin Peaks while riding a unicycle on a tightrope while juggling torches, flaming torches up in the air, trying to make sense and trying not to get burned, trying not to get hurt. And what we're left with is just like, how on earth did my life end up here? And we're dazed, we're confused, we're just constantly questioning reality as a whole. Like, what is real at this point? And what does that lead to? It leads to cognitive dissonance. Now, what's cognitive dissonance? Cognitive dissonance is when our reality is completely challenged. We're growing up, we're living in a world, and everything kind of makes sense to us in that environment. And then all of a sudden things start to shift. And then we realize that everything that we've been doing up to this point has been a lie. And there's another reality that we've just suddenly been thrust upon us. And what's that like? Well, it's like waking up one day and realizing that, Darth Vader is actually your father. And you just realize you just made out with your sister. Like, how messed up is that? Because what it does is it challenges your core beliefs. And the way it leaves you just questioning everything that you thought you knew. And here's a question that narcissism abuse survivors ask. It's like, why on earth would someone who claims to love you hurt you without a trace of empathy? Why? The person that you thought you knew, the one that was wearing the narcissistic mask, them, in one fell swoop, they become a complete stranger to you. And it just shakes your reality and your understanding of humanity at its core. And what's really messed up is how narcissistic abuse is just this toxic little cocktail, and it's made up of all sorts of toxic ingredients. Everything from like emotional neglect to, concealed violence to mind games to triangulation to gaslighting to manipulation to just downright plain lies. And you're in the middle of this and you're realizing the walls keep shifting, the ground keeps moving, and the exit door, it's locked shut because there's a trapped feeling. Because narcissism is all about control, and over time, they take away more and more and more and more of our control. And at some point, we realize we don't have any control left. And at that point is when we realize how much we actually lost, how much we actually gave away willingly, not knowing, trusting. And if it's something we can give away, well, then it's something we can take back. In fact, sometimes the best place to start is just stop giving away the control. Start seeing what it is in your life that you have control over, that you can take control over. Or maybe it's just a blow the whole thing up and start again. Because sometimes some things just aren't worth fixing. Some things aren't worth saving. Narcissists are really, really, really tricky, really tricky. And there's something weird about the way it's not just about the new wounds that they utilize to maintain this, this noose of control over our lives and our thinking and our behavior and everything. Everything gets controlled. A lot of it has to do with the fact that they pick at scars, old scars, pre-relationship scars, and then re-injure those. And these old scars and the new scars, the way they kind of interplay at each other and overlap, creates this just massive sense of confusion. And it's really hard to understand what the narrative is of it. It's like if you, even after watching the last episode of Lost, and you go through the whole plot line and you try to figure everything out, it still doesn't quite make sense. And at some point, it's just like, you know what, it doesn't matter. It was something that was entertaining for a little while and then got really weird. And that's when I just said no. And understanding parts of the narrative, the parts of us that were manipulated and that made these behaviors okay over time, those are important things to actually go back and fix so we don't repeat those patterns again with new partners and new people. But the entire narrative isn't something we need to package up and fully understand in order to heal from and move on from. Because each and every one of us, we're going to have a post-narcissism identity. And it's like waking up one day and not even knowing who you are. Because the person that you became to survive that environment wasn't you. It was a role that you had to play in order to survive. And these are all survival tactics and survival things that we end up doing just to kind of try to keep ourselves safe in some way. And then looking back, we're not sure who we are anymore. And it's all done because of the narcissist's constant gaslighting and manipulation. And they leave us just in this ongoing state of crisis. They're constantly triggering us, pushing our buttons. They know exactly which buttons to push because they've been practicing for quite a while. They know exactly how to get a reaction from you. And that's what they want. That is what narcissistic supply is. You being as panicked on the outside as they're feeling every single day of every moment of every part of their life. And yeah, what they do is they leave you with an identity crisis. But is it your identity crisis? Or are they living an identity crisis that they've just somehow mixed up onto you? And then it's driving you crazy so they can say, oh, look at that. That person I just made crazy. That's not me, right? Even though I projected all my stuff onto them and just unloaded all my baggage onto them, made them insane as I feel on the inside, I can just say, wow, yeah, that's awful, isn't it? That's what narcissists do, and it's a mind bender, but it's part of their psychopathy. It's part of their delusional way of thinking. And at the end of it, it's what we end up feeling is we doubt our own fundamental truths. But the reality is fundamental truths are one of those things that we can't be destroyed. They're always going to be there. And we're always going to be able to rebuild, no matter how bad it was. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard. At the end of those relationships, when just everything is just completely messed up, when we're trying to explain these narcissistic injuries to others, it's honestly like, trying to speak a foreign language to just people that just don't understand. We don't have one of those Star Trek, universal communicators. Can you imagine trying to speak English while there's a room full of aliens that just don't even, they just look at you all weird? That's what it's like trying to explain it. And everyone that's around you, that as you're trying to explain what's been going on, they look at you like you're the Mad Hatter from Alice in Wonderland, when the reality is you're actually Alice and you got stuck in someone else's acid trip and you're trying to explain that to somebody else who has never taken acid. So yeah, that's exactly the communication barrier. Can you see? The truth is, and trust me on this, is like you're not the mad one. You're just trying to make sense of madness that was just thrust upon you. And it was done in such a methodical and malicious manner that we lost the ability to grasp where it actually went wrong. But it doesn't matter at what point we find reality. As long as we find it, the best time to find reality is yesterday. The second best time is today, because today we can change tomorrow, and that's the end of the story. All the regret, all the resentment, all the shame, the rumination, the I should have, is that actually helping us? Because it's just like, yes, that happened. Absolutely. That did happen. That mess over there, it did happen. I accept that. But I'm here now. And from here, I want to go here. And then figure out what it is to separate the past, present, and future, and then design our own reality. And I get it. It's like trying to explain to friends and family that, hearing that you're in this narcissistic, horror film, that, they're going to mean well. They're going to mean well, and they're going to say things like, and they're going to say things, oh, they just had a bad day, or, you know what, all relationships have their normal ups and downs, and you're just kind of on one of those weird spots right now, and it'll pass. Or, they might even enlighten you. They might even say, oh, they love you. If they didn't love you, they wouldn't be so passionate about you. But all these things they're just really bad pieces of advice. And some people might be even get, philosophical, where somebody might just kind of pull out like a Dumbledore quote, like, happiness can be found in the darkest times if only we remember to turn on the light. Well, though that kind of darkness, there is no light. The lights have been rewired. And when you flick them on, it's just a pyrotechnic crazy show. So, thank you for offering that advice, friends and family. Thank you. But no, that kind of narcissistic darkness, there is no putting a layer of icing on top of it. You can't put more lipstick on that pig. It's disgusting. And then though some of that advice that we may get, maybe, trying to help, trying to be meaningful, but it's actually horrible advice. And there's so many misconceptions out there. A lot of people will just like look at the mess that you're in and the chaos that you're in and say something like, it takes two to tango. Okay? Right. It takes two to tango. But when it comes to narcissistic abuse, it's more like dancing on a puppet master's strings, and someone is pulling all the strings. So this isn't tangoing at all. We're not tangoing at all. We're just being manipulated. And it's not a dance that we're choosing, but we're just getting bounced around from one delusion to another. And I get the part of the two takes two to tango where you need an enabler and an abuser. I get that. But when the enabler is just completely the only way to survive is to enable, it's just like, well, that's how they survived. And the narcissist mask, the ones that they put out to the other people, they actually feel like they're superheroes, like they're these majestic, noble creatures that are just suffering because, you won't enable them anymore. They expertly craft and switch their personalities from that abuser that's treating you so badly to just this, oh, I'm so baffled by what's happening here. That switch that narcissists do to play up to an audience is it's deplorable. And it actually, the people that believe the narcissist, the flying monkeys, it makes the whole situation for the victim even worse. And it takes even longer because there isn't a coping strategy. There isn't a support network. It all gets taken away. And what keeps people trapped in these narcissistic relationships is just fear. And fear is just a powerful motivator. And here's the thing. It's like you got the fear of staying and you got the fear of leaving. And leaving a narcissistic relationship, it's its own labyrinth all unto itself. It's kind of like, navigating through the hallways of Dumbledore, and you have a compass that's just like literally lines drawn on a piece of paper. It's not even a functioning compass. You just end up just going from one hallway to another, one staircase to another. And it's just the complexities of leaving or staying in a narcissistic relationship. It's just this maze of just emotions, of financial constraints, of psychological manipulation, and it's its own animal onto itself. There is no easy way to leave a narcissist. There's no clean exit. And where does society fit in all of this? Because there's a lack of support and a lack of understanding. Trying to create an understandable narrative to explain to the average person what narcissistic manipulation does to our world is, it's like building a sandcastle without sand or water or beach. It's just such a hard thing to do because society just doesn't even recognize how devastating the effects of narcissistic abuse are. And what ends up happening is we end up leading to this victim blaming society. And that ends up leading to more, isolation for the victims themselves. And that lack of support when a victim first steps forward, first tries to explain what they're experiencing. That lack of support it's very subtle at first. And people may want to try to understand. And it's like, you can understand that it's just like, okay, so they hurt you. They treated you really badly. What did they do? Oh, they use words you don't like. Oh, yeah. Yeah. I could see why you think that. Oh, these words, it's hard to explain exactly how hurtful these words are and how precisely chosen these words were to cause the most damage, to go deep into your psyche and deep into those wounds and just really poke deep and cause deep psychological trauma. Yeah, those words. How do I explain that to you? Yes, they used words on me that really hurt, but I don't think you understand how much they hurt. And that's something that's just through time and through education, more and more people are going to kind of understand the effects of this. Going to be able to just, when you say narcissist, they know exactly what you're talking about. But for the most part, the most support that victims of narcissistic abuse get are from other victims that have gone through it and completely understand. And I think education and understanding of narcissism is kind of the first step towards liberation from narcissistic abuse. And by seeing the patterns and recognizing the patterns and just being able to label the absurdity of these narcissistic traits and narcissistic tactics, being able to put names to them, the manipulation, the gaslighting, the projection, the moving the goalposts, the love bombing, seeing those things, giving them a name makes them real. And once they're real, then we can break free from this toxic grip. And then that's when we start to rebuild our lives. Because the truth is like each and every one of us has the power to make changes, to find empowerment, and to just turn the page on this chapter and start a new one. Because we can rewrite our story. Even though the story got to here, we can rewrite the meaning of what that was, our experience was. It doesn't make us failures. It just means there's something more dramatic that we had to overcome in order to be who we are, in order to move forward in our lives. And in that process, that's where strength is found. That's where courage is found. This is where a new adventure begins with new understanding. And this leads to just a triumphant return to yourself, your true self, your real self, your unbreakable, unstoppable self.